Recording to the cloud. So we're at our 8th session, the last session of this series of the new economics. And we're going to chase down some things from the appendix, the three worlds of suppliers, and review chapter 4, which is on the system of profound knowledge. I've always wondered exactly what Deming meant by profound, but one of the synonyms for profound is fundamental, and I buy that as a very useful way of viewing a system of profound knowledge, because it doesn't eliminate other ideas. This is foundational. You build upon this. So you can bring in ideas from Tom Johnson and Russ Akoff and others that are compatible or even expanding on what Deming's talking about. And I'm disappointed for people who think if Deming didn't say it, then there's no point in paying attention to it. That's rather limiting.
And very undeming, too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Deming wanted us to learn. That's why he offered us this.
I mean, to pick up on that, I've met quite a few guys in the Deming community, and they're completely narrow-minded about Deming and his teachings, and they don't go wider than that. It has to be the Deming way or no other way, and I can't get that. I mean, because of my statistical background and processes and stuff, I can see the connections, but also because I'm a statistician, I want to use statistical methods in the right place at the right time. And I want to improve people's knowledge, because certainly in the UK, there's a lack of knowledge of statistical thinking. But that some of the Dem people, they've got no idea about statistics whatsoever.
Yes. I read a book years ago that I thought was very intriguing. I can't remember, was it Polis who wrote it? It's Innumeracy, which is illiteracy except in terms of mathematics. It's really brilliant.
Yeah. Or as I call people, numerically illiterate.
Yes. My favorite is everybody thinks that all people can be above average. That's not going to work well.
They can in Lake Wobegon.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Who wrote Lake Wobegon, Dick?
Garrison, that was Garrison Keillor's.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
Make believe.
Yeah, and my wife,
Minnesota background.
Yeah, my wife read that to me after I'd had a bad accident, and she taught English and French, but she could not read Garrison Keillor out loud, Lake Wobegon. It was a mess.
Is that right?
Yeah.
One of the things that I put out there last week at End to End is Deming is really solely a learning process with some very clever ways of learning, the statistics, for instance. But it is basically just a learning program. And I didn't get any pushback on that like I thought I would.
Okay.
Well, and the application of a system of profound knowledge is a great learning experience. And depending on what organization you might be trying to transform, it has different appearances, but it follows the same fundamentals. It's not repetitive. It's not a recipe. You're not cooking a dinner. You're trying to help people learn about their organization so they can do the things they need to do, which may be way different from what other organizations need.
Do you think that's one of the difficulties with the Deming way of thinking? It's not like a recipe. Here's how you do it.
Yeah.
I always thought Dr. Deming makes you think,
Yeah.
and you have to think differently about how you apply it within your organization. But I think over here in the UK, at least, that's predominantly where I've worked. People want a recipe book. They want to say step one, step two, step three. And if you do all of that and you do it well, you'll achieve your ultimate goal. But I don't think life's like that. I mean, I've read Feigenbaum and Duran and others. I mean, not recently, back in the day,
Yeah.
but that was like a recipe book. But Deming isn't, and I
No.
always think it challenges your thinking, and I
Yeah.
don't think people get that.
No, and that's we find that in Into In at some of our conferences. I remember at one conference, somebody asked at the tag end when we were all gathered together, said, "You gave us all this neat stuff. It's wonderful. I learned all this stuff. What do you want us to do?"
Do with it.
Yeah.
Do what you want. I
Yeah.
ignore it, use it, apply it, whatever.
Well, Deming said several times, didn't he? Some people asked him questions, and he said, "I don't know anything about your industry.
Yes,
You're the expert."
yes.
But and RCQI, Charter Quality Institute, one of their freebies that is available to, well, I think it's probably only to members, but is a list of all the tools, of which tool is appropriate for what.
Yeah.
But that's driving the same thinking of, well, you do these three tools and you've done Deming sort of thing. Or
Yeah.
it's just
In every session I give that I'm going to try to teach some people how to use a tool like the 6 thinking hats or some simple statistics or whatever it is. I start with a couple of slides having to do with Deming and profound knowledge, and tell them that no matter how many tools they come up with, that's not what's going to save them. They have to have a worldview that's expanded enough to be able to do things. And the tool isn't, in fact, you don't need the tools. You start applying things, and if you think you need a tool, you can go look for one or invent one.
And
Well, the other thing was, oh, go ahead.
No, carry on, Dick.
The other thing that I was trying to get across last weekend was that moral values don't come from the system of profound knowledge.
Yes.
yeah.
You bring those on your own. And it's the same thing with Bill Schirkenbach's.
Yep.
What's his 3 things? Logical, physical, and emotional. Those don't come from system of profound knowledge. So there's a lot of stuff that you have to know before you, or in conjunction with Deming. Deming supports them all, but you don't find them there. You don't get to do that.
Yeah, the values come from the people doing the application. It's and you could be a person wanting to run a gang using this, I suppose. might not fit very well, but it's neutral. It's here's how you can learn about your organization and decide how you want to handle things based on what you're learning and based on how it fits in with your purpose and what you're trying to do. Your purpose and what you're trying to do is a value decision. So there's value in that, but that doesn't come from profound knowledge.
No, but that's about the only place that Deming mentions moral values. That is, but he doesn't say where you get it.
Yep. I also, I'm always fond of Deming reminding us that any characteristic that you can measure, you're going to end up with different values for it. And so you might need operational definitions. I don't remember where I got the example, but let's say Dick and I agree I'm going to sell him a blanket that's 50% wool and 50% cotton. And when he gets it, the top half is all wool and the bottom half is all cotton. So it met the requirements, but it's probably not what he wanted. And so operational definitions are important, but that then leads to the fact that there's no true value for anything you measure. It's an agreed to value based on your definitions of how you're going to do the measurement. And after you do the measurement, maybe you do 10 of them and you take an average, take a mean, take the high one, take the low one. You've got to decide.
I remember, and again, got to remember we're being recorded. So working with one company and our customer and working with a project team, and they'd got this contract that the sales guys had won. And I said, but I'm interested, spoke about operational definitions. And I said, do you truly understand the customer requirement? Well, we think, why are you asking? We think we do. I said, well, just you take what they've written down and you write it down in your words and send it back and see whether your understanding is what they meant. And it wasn't.
No.
But eventually that went back to and fro, maybe 6 or 8 times. And at the end of that dialogue over maybe a couple of months, before they started planning or designing anything, both sides, the customer and us, the supplier, had agreed what was explicitly required. So again, it comes into planning, into thinking, into defining what it is the customer actually wants and what you're going to deliver. And the customer said, this is the first time this has ever happened.
Wow.
But it worked. And I mean, if anybody's interested, you can look at me on LinkedIn and try and work out which company I'm talking about, but I'm not going to say so.
That's
Well,
it.
no,
That's
and- yeah, is that an operational definition of what the customer wanted? I mean, you had a process where you went back and forth and determined. I mean, that could have been, half a dozen times back and forth
Yeah,
to get
it
a good
was.
understanding. Yeah. And
Yeah, it was.
I think that is the definition of an operational definition.
Yeah.
It's a process that you use so that two
Yeah,
people can
that's
do
good.
business.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
it's a great demonstration of how the quality of the product is a joint responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's picked up in the world number 3, I think, where it's working together and about continual improvement. I did notice as well, by the way, that the word continual was used, not continuous. And Bill
Yeah.
Sherkenbach, a couple of months ago in London, went to his one-day seminar. He made the clear distinction between continual and continuous. So if you're continual, you're sort of you've made an improvement, you're ambling along, but then you need a step change to really jump up even further or down, depending which way is better, to get where you need to be. But if it's continuous, it could just be a line that's going up and with a bit of variation. But he emphasized continual, not continuous.
I think that's a good point too.
I was reading through this, and I think where was it on page? We can jump back. I'm jumping forward, but we can jump back. Joyce Orsini in my copy, and she said, catastrophe planning when your supplier has an issue, ask a competitor to step in and try to provide, unfortunately, on short notice, the material or service required. And I'm really struggling with that because in today's world, with proprietary information, non-disclosure agreements, confidentiality, patents, etc., how would that work? I mean, it's like don't jump to a single source supplier, but be working towards it. But I thought if you have one supplier and they have an issue, catastrophe planning, which it should happen, how could you then give the business to another because of all those conditions I just met. Anybody any ideas on that?
Well,
There
he
was the
says
black
go
black paint
slowly.
problem. Sorry, there was a black paint problem only a few years ago where the factory burnt down, and cars in Japan, I think it was, couldn't produce black ones.
Yeah, I think there's certainly some work in that going on. And then here in the States, there's going to be a lot of nervousness because long-term contracts in the States, at least in aerospace, seem to be about a year and a half.
Wow.
And nobody's going to invest much of anything without a guarantee that they're going to get a return on investment, and it's doubtful to come in a year and a half. So it's and you'd be worried that if you recommended a competitor that your customer would decide like he likes the competitor better, and you're out of any repeat contracts. But yeah, I hadn't thought about the all of the all of the sensitive information that
Mm.
suppliers might need to keep in order to keep a competitive advantage.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, we used to run into it occasionally where a ready mix supplier would give out concrete ready mixes again, and one of my banes in my career, I suppose. But if you rejected two other local suppliers and chose the one that you thought was marginally best, and helped them to try and improve what they were doing, and then for some reason you had to step away from them and choose another because they burnt down or something, or crashed or burnt or something. Um, that's a hell of a thing to try and get another organization who you didn't have any confidence in the first place.
Yes.
well, he was saying, you might try two or three of them to begin with,
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's a dance story. You have to find out which one you dance best with. And he said it's dangerous.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and he recommends you don't have the resources to have every one of your supplier relationships in World 3.
Yeah. So you want to work towards that single source, but you don't jump into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. I dealt with it a little bit with the government entity. We had to kind of qualify a whole secondary, sourcing path work every 5 years. So the way we did it, because it was tough, right? You're not giving them your business, your full business. So we just had to pay them for a runs, right? And then, take it through all to the finished product and do all the testing, make sure the finished product was still, fully compliant. It was a little easier because we got paid by the government for that process, but that's what we did. It was just every 5 years. It was a painful process to go and get individual suppliers that we don't use that often, and keep them up to date. And it took a while. It took a lot of expense.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yeah. Go on, Alan.
well,
No, carry on.
we encountered similar sort of things where you're looking for, because construction moves around the country as a business. You go into a new area and you've got several people there who don't really want your business.
Oh.
Um, so you end up with people trying to price themselves out of the quotation. Other people, oddly, would give you a quotation wherever you were in the country, and then you question whether that was any value in it at all because they're so far away from their base, sort of thing. So you've got all those sort of political things going on. And as I said, in construction again, most of the stuff is 6 months of work, and then you don't need any more concrete. You're doing other things. You're laying grass seed and blacktop and stuff. So the runs on the work are so short for a construction company, but the principles I like to think that Deming identified still apply.
Yes. NASA bumped into that with the transition from space shuttle engines to the engines for the Artemis, where some of the prime contractors, critical suppliers of specific parts, weren't interested in doing business with space anymore. Probably because in the beginning they and the rest of the world was enamored of it, and right now it's for a lot of them it's just a pain in the ass to try to deal with all the requirements and all the bureaucracy. And so it's fundamentally the same engine that was on the space shuttle, and some of the prime suppliers to the contractors just opted out.
Mm.
So that costs a lot of schedule delay and a big increase in costs.
Yeah. I made some other notes as well about suppliers from my sort of backstory, and again keeping it neutral. There was a supplier to an OEM, and one of my colleagues went down there a few months before we needed the product, and the supplier said, "When is the rest of your team arriving?" And he said, "Well, it's just me." And they said, "Well, we had another big customer. They came down 2 years before we started making anything, and they sent like 6 people, and they were here for a couple of weeks looking at all of our processes to understand what we did, how they would work with us, how we would work with them." And then also I made another note here that we were supplying an OEM who'd never worked with us before, and but we'd won this national quality award, and the customer sent an engineer to be in situ line side for 6 months because again they needed to. And we said, "You're a new supplier to us. We don't trust you." But we had with the national quality award, all our process were there, standard operating procedures. I remember SOP 101 because it was 101 pages long, and and that's what it was known as. But it's just, the customer's perceptions of suppliers. Even if you've got all these awards, they still want to know how you do, what you do, why you do it, and they want to engage with you. And the suppliers, meanwhile, have got to do the same thing. They've got to understand their customers and their needs and their requirements. So,
Yeah, and that interaction, I was surprised. This has got to be 15 or 20 years ago where I first bumped into an example of a supplier being an integral part of the provider of the product. Bose, and I don't remember whether they're working on their speakers or their amplifiers, but there was a Bose employee who was stationed at the supplier of the piece parts the Bose was going to need, and he went around and made sure that orders were made to resupply whatever piece parts are needed. So there was a max min kind of condition, and his job was to go around and make sure he got the orders that supplier was going to send to his company. He got the orders and got the parts in so they could continue to work, and it was really a different kind of relationship. I'd never seen that before.
yeah.
That was a valuable trip, and one of our guys lived out there for 6 months while we got this process completed, so he could go around and approve personally or check personally each delivery.
Yeah. And that was Deming's point about cease mass inspection.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
sometimes you have to do it at a great cost.
Yeah,
And, one company we worked with, we asked a German supplier to do something for us. And we had a set of procedures, advanced quality planning. And they said, no, we are German. We do not do that. And what they developed was dropped 3 months after job one because it wasn't fit for purpose. But they did not follow like what I would call standard engineering quality design principles.
yeah.
So it was dropped.
Tim, are you going to go into some of the loss function issues today?
Like what? Which loss functions?
Well,
Sure.
in the annex there. But what I'm particularly interested in is kind of the concept of using the loss function for management decisions.
Oh,
That the decision itself would be the output.
yeah. I like Taguchi's concept of loss, and I like trying to use it to figure out how you can improve your processes and improve the system. But I'm not.
improve the management system is what I
Yes,
was.
yes,
It's most of Deming's examples are hardware,
yeah, yeah.
and I would like to expand that because I think it's a great way to look at management decisions too. You know, how smart
Certainly,
do you have to be for some of these? Some of them you have to be pretty smart.
yes. Well, and and you have to talk about operational definitions. You're going to need quite a few operational definitions when you're attacking that in order to get some consistency and understanding about what you're doing, because it's with hardware it's easier. I don't know about services because I haven't been in the service industry. How easy it is to utilize the loss function, but when you look at how to run a government or how to run how to run a school system, you might bump into some problems with figuring out loss. The school system, I noticed they don't even know what their purpose is. So to move on from that is kind of problematic.
I
Well,
guess.
how to be a CEO.
Aye. I was going to say in the service industry, I'm just thinking about some internal processes I was aware of, but not directly involved in. But the systems were set up. Well, actually, there's another one, but two things. Systems set up by the leadership so that, let's just say, an engineer sends in something to finance, and then finance rejects it because the details out there. But the system was not designed to be right first time. It was there to create losses, i.e., loss in process time. Two and forth, two and forth. It's not like the previous example where you're working on the operational definition and operational definition. This was things going back and forth for no good reason because the engineer, design engineer, did not understand the system because finance had not expressed it very well. And I guess that's then you can take that up a higher level and say to management, why did this happen? I mean, we had another company who had a 2-day offsite in Germany just to map the processes because the field guys were complaining about all the rubbish they had to do. And it was quite clear the IT systems, which design, manufacturing, and supply were using, were not fit for purpose. But nobody thought to question it. And so that's where you get a loss to the executive level. But they seem to be blindsided to it because they think they're gods and whatever they've created is fit for purpose, but it isn't. So you need to look really hard inwardly and examine what you do and identify waste um, and rework. And because that, I think, ties in nicely to the loss function. If you've got to keep reworking something, that's at one end. If you can rework it, it's like manufacturing, making widgets. But on the other hand, if you can't rework it, it's just a loss. You've got to start again. So on the other side. So that's my sort of thinking about that.
Yeah, and even if you have to rework it, that's loss too, not as great
Absolutely.
of loss as you
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
thinking if a company makes a bundle of money, how would you distribute that money to the employees with the idea of the loss function in mind?
Okay. Can you expand on that a little bit, Dick?
Well, um, we made money last year at the company, thank heavens. And we split it up among the all the employees. We're an employee-owned company, and so everybody kind of knows what's going on with that, and we have to come up with a method for distributing the money. And you can distribute to all the one person, and you're going to get some loss from all the others. So, that might be way high on one side. Um, you can split it up a bunch of different ways. And how do you split it up to minimize the loss? Nobody's going to get as much as they want.
Yeah.
Well, I've thought about that in the past. So I know of companies that the senior managers and above get a bonus even when the company's making a loss. They still get a
Yes.
bonus, which is really bad.
Yeah.
But I don't I've never agreed with bonuses. I've always said that you're paid your annual salary for what you do, and that's where the real value is. So if the company makes a profit, let's keep the numbers simple. The company makes $1,000 profit over the year. You've got 1,000 employees. Everybody gets $1. That's it. But the dollar going to the bottom of the lowest paid person is worth more intrinsically in value than going to the person at the top. But the difference is between the top and the bottom, they're paid different rates for their knowledge and expertise and hopefully doing the right thing for the organization. But you could say, well, that's a bit mean. So why don't the people at the top get a bigger chunk of the money? But they're being paid very well to start with. So why do they need to get a bigger chunk of the bonus pot?
Yeah, it's
Well,
interesting, isn't it?
that's another method. And I think it's used
Yeah.
pretty regularly. What we do is we add two numbers together as a numerator, and those numbers are the amount of money you're making in dollars per hour, and add it to your years of service. Just gives us a number, and then we add up everybody's years of service in dollars per hour, and that's the denominator.
Oh.
So
Mhm.
that's the fraction that you get.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with how hard you worked as
Yeah.
an individual. It has a lot to do with how hard you worked as a group,
Mm.
Yeah.
as a company. And we've been doing that for 35 years or so. So it seems to work. There is a loss fund because, you know, especially new guys say, well, I worked harder than he did. You know, you're going to get that. But and that's why I like these other methods, like you were just saying, a buck a piece, and kind of look at it from a loss function. Where would that fit in the loss function?
Mm. Yeah.
I know where everybody, one guy gets it all, I know where that fits. But
Yeah, I think one of the great things about the loss function is it's asking you to look downstream, not
yeah,
just right here and now, but look downstream. When you
yeah,
do this, what's going to happen?
Right.
yeah,
That's a huge benefit.
I think a big part of that also is that everyone is getting something, because otherwise you get into the, well, R&D was really successful this year, but production drug us down. And, so you definitely need to reinforce that we're all in this as a team and we're all getting rewarded as a team for sure.
that that idea within the company that some group is working harder than another group will never go away.
It's tough.
But there,
I
you know,
remember as well, one company, they said, well, team of 6 people, there's 6% of the payroll to give out as a bonus. But actually you're limited because you can only use 4% of it. So some get a payment and some don't. And it's just completely arbitrary based on the manager in charge.
Mm.
In a
Personal
recent
experience
quote,
for me, I was told you've done an excellent job this year, but you can't have a pay rise because you had a pay rise last year. So why should I bother then? Why should I do an excellent job if I'm not going to get some kind of reward?
yeah, it would be interesting to see if Spain, after winning a bunch of money by winning the World Cup, if they decided to distribute the money based on contribution. And since Argentina only managed one shot the whole game and it wasn't on target, the goalie doesn't get anything. Everybody else gets something.
Yeah, nice one.
well, that's where I'm going with this is how would you look at that as a loss function? Where would it go? Where would it be versus, minimum loss? And how would you kind of quantify it? Because you'd have to quantify it over a long period of time,
Yes.
I think.
Yeah.
Because, like in Martin's case where, somebody didn't get a bonus, they're going to be ticked off for a long time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And morale goes to hell, and it's very hard to quantify that, but somehow we have to look at, how do you quantify some of those things, or
Yeah,
even try to.
Yeah, maybe turnover rates, increased turnover, something like that is at least somewhere you can look.
Yeah,
But that's a tough one. That is.
yeah, and that's not a leading indicator either.
Mm,
That's a
too many
lagging
other
indicator.
factors.
But those are some of the things that Deming came up with that I think need to be expanded on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we had some people suggest uh, the projects would make a fortune in the normal run of things, and others would run into problems. And the ones that ran into problems, you work bloody hard to pull them back. You worked all hours God made. You spent a lot of time sorting out the stuff, but still you'd be lucky to break even at the end.
Yeah.
But people were suggesting that we should have a profit sharing thing, and only the projects who'd made money should be in the share. It would have been much better for the staff to walk away from the bad jobs, and then you see if you can find somebody to work on it.
But picking up on that, if you've got, let's say your company, let's say there were 4 projects in the year, 3 of them made a profit and 1 didn't. It's not necessarily the fault of the individual employees that they didn't make a profit.
Absolutely.
So why, everybody should get a share. And then of
Yeah.
course the ones that the project did make a profit, why are you giving our money away to those guys? But over in the overall sense of the team effort and the ethos, maybe there's some guys who were fantastic on the loss-making project. So why should they be penalized? Because there's something in the system that's out with their control.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No, you've hit the nail on the head. Fortunately, we persuaded them that that wasn't the way to go.
Oh, good.
It's interesting how the loss is likely dependent upon how much cohesion there is within the organization and within the various components. If they better recognize how what each one of them and each person and each organization contributes, and some of them look like they might be a loss or less less contributors, but that it's if everybody's in agreement that this is what we're trying to do and understands how his contribution fits in, including the janitor when we get a launch that manages to get in the right orbit, and we let him know that thanks in part to him doing what he did, we were able to have a successful launch because the engineers and the designers and the analysts weren't running around trying to clean up the place. They were doing their work. And if you can get a feeling of that, and I don't know how you measure it, but if you get a feeling of that, you can that I think helps with reducing the loss. You have to operate out of theory, I would think, because I don't know any way to prove you reduce the loss.
Yeah. I think Deming's unknown and unknowable comes
Yeah.
into play. There's just so many factors that could affect the profitability of a particular project. And I think I'm with Martin. I work for the salary you give me, not for the bonus. Mind you, I did acquire a few bags of cement occasionally.
And Tim used the word janitor. I've always said to everybody that the one person in any building, wherever I've worked, I want to get really friendly with is the janitor.
Yeah.
Because I've always said, they know lots of stuff that you're never going to know. And if you need somebody to do something for you, then go to the janitor and things will happen and they'll make your life easy. But you do not want to upset the janitor because he or she will make your life hell.
They have all the keys.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
But
they're a font of knowledge.
Yeah.
Going back to this loss function, though, if you could make that visible, then you would have more people, more employees with many different companies understanding why it might be a good idea to split it up
Yeah.
like that. But if we can't make it visible, it's hard to explain that to another company.
Yeah.
One thing we did make visible when I was on the one of the directors at the whiskey company, we used to have our board meetings around all the individual sites, so bottling hall, distiller, etc. No, we didn't drink. You don't drink on site. That's illegal. But we used to walk the facility, and the team players, like low paid workers, would see us walking around, talking about stuff, looking at the state of the fabric of the building, picking up litter. And I thought, why are they doing that? Because we're proud of the facility. We don't want to see rubbish laying around. So that then sort of got embedded into the workforce. I think these guys do care. And I think that was a key pivotal moment for me. And in another company, I said, if we're going to work with the shop floor workers, I said we really need to engage with them, have pre-meetings, and develop a level of trust. And I said one way to do that, I said I'll go out and buy like some chocolate biscuits or chocolate cookies. You would say in the States, and they said, why'd you do that? I said because it's an icebreaker, and if they give us their tea and coffee, the least I can do is give them some chocolate biscuits in return. And the management were horrified. I said, but if you want them to do something for you, you've got to engage with them. Show them that you're not chastising them why there are problems. You're trying to get knowledge out of them. So, in a sense, to come up on Dick's point, I'm trying to minimize loss by engaging with the workforce to get their trust and confidence.
Mhm.
You can
And I think
call them what you want,
sometimes,
I'll be there.
go ahead, Dick.
No, I was just saying you can call them biscuits or cookies, I'll be there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think sometimes too, a story and like Dick was stating, showing the extreme of something. Hey, let's only pay one person versus let's spread it evenly. I think, telling stories and just talking about those things can give you a feel for the loss as well. And you don't necessarily have to have exact numbers.
Mm. I think the losses that one encounters when things go wrong and or don't fit or need mending and things. We I centered a lot of my work around non-conformities, scheduling, listing non-conformities, so that when the problem was identified, somebody needed to put their hand up and say, "We've got a problem here." Many people don't like that, of course, not doing that. But we started adding a cost to it. So what is this? Is this a £50 problem or a £500 problem or a £10,000 problem? Or how big is it? And then the QSs, quantity surveyors in our business, wanted to get involved in working out how much it was costing. And I said, no, ballpark figures. We'll worry about the numbers later. We just want to know how serious this is. And we used to try and use that as a measure of where are the major problems? Where are most of the problems coming from in the company? What can we do about that? So it didn't affect obviously bonuses or loss function, but we used it as a method of trying to identify areas that we needed to find some improvement, and help people to do the job better. Sorry, that was a bit of a killer, was it?
I also noticed something this time through that when I noticed it, I said, yeah, I should have remembered that. Having to do with over justification, where it's an insult to give somebody a prize or a reward for doing something they did out of sheer pleasure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes, I struggle with that whenever I'm in a restaurant,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially when I was in Florida.
Within the work environment, I don't find that over justification coming up very often, if ever. Might be there. Maybe I'm just blind to it.
Hmm.
In a home environment, you can sure see it.
You can see, I've seen it at work in some cases where whoever's managing the group rewards somebody, and that guy doesn't have any respect at all for the manager, and he doesn't he doesn't feel impressed with the reward. He's pissed off.
You may have deeper problems there too.
Yes. Yes.
I'll say, yeah.
So Deming's work has been around a long time, and people have been exposed to it. But frankly, I only know two Deming run companies. One is Peaker and the other is Bondog. Do you guys know any other companies that are Deming run?
There was one in the UK, I think in the north of England, and I think they were a brick manufacturing company,
Yes.
house bricks.
Oh yeah.
And I think there was one other, but I can't remember what industry they're involved in. Hazel Cannon would know, but I've forgotten. And there were speakers at the Deming Forum conferences we used to hold. But eventually the interest waned. They used to get 200 or 300 attendees, and it dropped off to about 50, 60 people after Dr. Deming passed away. So that's the only two I can think of in the UK.
The brick outfit, that the president up there was Alan too, wasn't it? Wasn't his first name Alan?
I don't know. I can't remember.
I don't remember. I remember seeing something from then at one of the Deming conferences years ago.
And even even with people, it's a degree of Deming.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever could be 100% Deming. I'm not sure what that would be.
Yeah.
We try hard, but
Well, even for me, using that as a foundation and building around that would be great for any company. And I guess I'm not as surprised as disappointed that more companies and more people don't grasp the huge benefit of applying the knowledge that Deming offered us in a way that helps us learn more and more about what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish and how to go about it.
But do you think that's a reflection on, I can only speak for my experiences in the UK, Europe, and US. Do you think that's a reflection on the short-term thinking that we seem to possess in those three regions? I don't know about Asia Pac. I've never worked out there, but we seem to take the short-term view. And Tim said a while ago, and Alan, short-term contracts, and then a CEO might be in a US company for a few years, and then they're not focused on the long-term vision. I understand Toyota in Japan do take the long-term vision, and they don't own any money to any bank. I understand they are completely self-sufficient because they've taken the long-term view. But I don't think that's the case in UK, Europe. Do you think that's one of the issues we have, that there's a lack of take-up with Deming?
Oh, definitely. I would definitely say that you can see it in different teams and in on different projects and in different, in my case, construction companies. When you're working in joint ventures and stuff like that, in amongst the teams, you'll find somebody who's a greasy pole climber.
Yeah.
Well, there's also something else acting that is related to the marketplace, where if you're a publicly traded company, you have to report every quarter.
Yep. Yep.
And so how far downstream are you going to look?
I think it's getting
Yes.
worse, right? Just the whole society of wanting things now and convenience is also kind of driving things in that direction, getting more short term, not longer term thinking.
Yeah. Well, the banks and the financial reporting seems to encourage short-term thinking, doesn't it? Because they're worried about short-term profitability. So banks don't want to know that their money's being put at risk, because it's all about risk, isn't it? Banks are lending money at whatever their interest rates are, and they have a tendency to pull the money back, whip the carpet out from underneath an organisation because they think you're not going to last, and in doing that, of course, you don't.
Just picking up on that point, probably about 15, 20 years ago, specifically for Tim, you'll have heard of Leeds United Football Club in the north of England. They had something like a, can't remember the exact numbers. There's something like a £100 million loss, let's say. Whereas
Wow.
my local team, my home team, 30 miles south in Barnsley and also in the north of England, they were like a £5 million loss, but the bank wanted to close them down
Hmm.
because they thought there was a higher risk with a £5 million loss than with Leeds United or wherever it was, loss. It's just strange thinking. Anyway, there we go.
Yeah, I mean, soccer clubs are notably risky places to put your money, and that's why they attract Abramoviches of this world and investment from what is worryingly sourced money,
Yeah,
because they
Russian
want to,
oligarch.
they want to get to the stage of what's the word? Washing the money. What's the word?
Laundering the
Laundering
money.
the money.
Yeah.
And, and we sit back and let them do it.
Yeah,
You know, us as major traders, UK, US, connive with these people so they invest in London or invest in New York or run the money through the banks. It looks been scary to me, but I'm glad I'm only in construction.
Can you hear me?
yes.
Yep.
Hi, Victoria.
Hi. I just have something to add. For sure, in the United States, as as we know, it's all about money. You have the stock market, and then I was talking to somebody once in construction that they build homes, and I thought, why are something so sloppy in the tract homes? And he said, you have a crew come through, and they've got to do they have to do the electrical 100 houses. They've got to get through in a couple of days, and they're really just forced to go so quick. And I think the banks are watching them. The banks that have the loan on the project, and of course the banks connect right to the stock market. I think in Japan, for the companies, they have a lot more of the government backing. Like, the auto industry, their government is not going to let them fail. And I think a little bit of the backside on in Japan is they, I believe their engines, or the automobiles, at least how it used to be, 25,000 miles was considered like an old engine. And they've kind of, I'm not sure if they incentivize or force people to buy new cars. So you turn your cars over much faster. And I had met somebody once, I was just flying. I used to go back and forth. My husband is Japanese, my ex-husband. And so I met this American man who lives in Japan. He's married to a Japanese woman, and he lives there. And so he talked a lot about, he felt that it was a little bit that helping the Japanese companies, automotive companies, to stay alive. At least this is maybe in the earlier stages, that by having the Japanese people having to replace their cars so often. And they're much more incentivized to get the old cars off the roads. Like here, you would see now it's, I don't know, cars are getting so good. It's been so long now that they've been so good. But at one point, you would see a lot of older cars still on the road, people making them go a long time, last. But in Japan, you don't see that so much. So I think their government has done a lot to help the Japanese automotive companies stay alive. And part of that is their own public is helping, kind of being forced to help, right? So that's just some information I collected over the years.
Yeah.
But certainly the government's more supportive. Does that make sense? And here, everything this is a little bit different.
I think that's a good point though, because the subtitle for New Economics is for industry, government, and education. So that's a nice thing from Victoria about the government side. Not really cottoned on much about education in the New Economics as we've gone through the chapters. And I think the other thing that's missing for me, coming about MBAs and the economy, is about journalists. So yeah, the politicians, government, yeah, but journalists, I think we need to re-educate them into what's important for longevity because they're just pushing on the short-term thinking as well.
Yeah, they freak. For some reason, there's competition to get information out sooner rather than make it accurate.
Mm.
And I always figured that if they gave me a news story and I read it 4 days after the event, I still knew about the event, and they knew more about it if they wrote it 4 days later. But for some reason, there's this need to get things done right away. The National Transportation Safety Department does a good job of not answering the question, why did this accident happen, until they've got all the evidence. And the press gets all wrapped up around itself because they don't have the answer right now. Why don't you know what happened? So, well, we know some of what happened. We don't know why yet. And we need to know more of the what. Seems to be a competition to get stuff printed and out. And then they have what they call a news cycle, which is probably 3 or 4 days. So if the story doesn't go on much after that.
The other topic that we should be discussing as part of this, because I think it's all wrapped up together, is meritocracy.
Yes.
And the loss function, including meritocracy, would be pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah, and Deming's very clear in about the performance of the individuals in a system is governed primarily by the system. And there seems to be either a resistance to believing that or a flat out disbelief that that's what goes on. We're at least in this country, we're very conscious of individual performance, and that the individual performance either is good and helping or bad, and we need to get rid of it. So we have this dichotomy that I don't understand how it's so difficult to get people to recognize that the outcome of whatever's being done in any organization, no matter how big or how small, is affected by the interactions between all of those people. It's not any one of them doing something special. And that I don't know, that might be another problem with the educational system, is we can't get that point across to people. I'm not sure we try, because we have them competing with each other within that organization of education. So
I think schools somehow inculcate in kids some idea about productivity. Somebody must have sold this idea at school to me that we should watch the productivity of individuals and businesses, and then at the other end you've got the government who are busily they announce productivity is not improved, but they do it on the basis of finance or turnover or something, and how much work was produced or the value of work that was produced in a period. So there's a difference between what people mean about productivity. And I'm not qualified to even think about that. but we're all brought up to who was uh, who was the chap with the American chap with the lathes back in the 1920s ish.
What he
Famous.
did?
From
He
where?
say again.
From
Taylor.
you said American, like
Yeah,
he's
Taylor.
Frederick
is he like
Taylor?
industry?
Frederick
Say again.
Taylor.
Frederick
Oh,
Taylor. That was it.
Frederick Taylor, yeah.
Yeah, I mean he got into productivity in lathes because lathes were new throughout industry, and everybody was making their own cutting bits, and they were using stock steel to do it, or in some other cases they were using some high chrome steel, and in other cases some other blooming content of steel, and they were cutting them to different angles and different shapes. And Taylor started on the basis of trying to find out what was the best way of doing it, what was the most productive. And then it developed further and further and further about measuring productivity throughout everything. Yeah, anybody digging a hole had to have some productivity or something. And that is Taylor's thinking is stuck with Western business.
Yes.
But
Russ used to talk about that we're most organizations, at least in the industry, most organizations ought to be concentrating on effectiveness and they're preoccupied with efficiency. So they
yeah,
efficiently do the wrong thing and get themselves in trouble.
yeah, not looking into the overall effectiveness of what the business is doing. Yeah,
I think it's related to the short-term thinking again of you want
yeah,
a easy answer, right? You want somebody to point to that's the blame or that's the hero instead of really understanding the system and that takes a lot more work.
takes more work. Yeah. I mean, that's the way managers move up organizations quickly because they find solutions and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody else has to deal with the solution and try and make it work or try and cope with it in their organization after the top man's been gone. But
Yeah, and we talked about it earlier. Management mobility is not a great way to get long-term results.
yeah,
But when you say they find a solution and move on, either internally, externally, they haven't really found a solution.
agreed.
They've
Yeah,
they've just got a short-term fix, and the real problem is still there.
yeah.
Because they make a career from themselves of I
Yep.
can fix that,
Mm,
but they don't actually fix it. The problem comes back, and I'm thinking, again, another company that the problems are still there 30 years on that I met 30 years ago.
yeah.
Yep.
And you think, why is this? Because there's a fundamental issue within the company.
Mm. Yes, I think it was that made me think in terms of spending a lot of time thinking about non-conformance because it seemed to me that the problems that the business were encountering were just repeated. I mean, when I used to work in a department where technical queries used to come on, we've got a real problem. This has gone wrong. We don't know what's wrong, and we used to go and try and help. And there was a cycle. The problems with wood would be about once every 4 years. The problem with paint was every 2 years. The problem with welding was every 1 year, and concrete problems never went away.
Ah,
But from that viewpoint, sort of remote from the projects, it actually gave you quite a range of things that we could attempt to get out and talk to people about and suggest that they. I mean, one of the things that used to do in our department at the time was that mix designs for concrete would be prepared by the local ready mix company. And they would not necessarily follow all the requirements of the specification, which are fairly complicated. You know, and our first check was, do they meet the spec? And often case found they didn't. and then we could give some guidance to the locals to the project, and help them in the selection of which ready mix company they were going to use, because there's only 2, 3 of them in a big town, two or three different organisations, and clearly there was some better handle on it than others, and we used to have a preference for them. But we'd start off looking at the plant, and looking at the mix designs and looking at how the plant was run and all those sort of things. So it helped with at least getting the concrete right when it arrived on site, nearly.
Yeah, with Deming talking about, he wrote the book for government, industry, and education. That what he's telling us is that those organizations all have huge deficiencies in their ability to manage. Management is management, and how to manage the organization is the same problem. It's all those places, and then he gets angered at schools of business who are still teaching the old way of doing things, which will help all these new managers face a past they will never see,
Yeah.
rather than a future they're going to see.
Hey, Tim, just kind of a scheduling question. Is this the last of the series that you're going to be doing, or is there another one? Or
Oh, we're trying to do at least three cohorts a year. So
yeah, I mean, is this the last of this series?
yeah, it's the last of this one. We do 8 sessions. We could divide it up differently and do more or less, but I'm not sure.
From a learning by contrast,
Yes.
I would like to see what you would think about doing chapter 11.
Yeah. It's always intriguing to see somebody's response to Deming and then explain what they think ought to get done here, there, and everywhere. And some of it seems to fit better with what Deming appears to have been thinking than other things. And yeah, the contrast is always a great way to do things, putting things side by side and looking at them. I think that's a great way to learn. Look at the difference between these two things and the similarities between these two things.
Yeah, I don't have chapter 11 in my copy, so that's
Yeah, you
That's the new one.
have to get a 3rd edition. That got Kelly
Allen.
Kelly Allen wrote
Oh yeah, I know Kelly Allen. Yeah, I've met him a couple of times.
Why Deming, Why Now More Than Ever chapter that they placed as chapter 11 in the 3rd edition.
Very sensible
Okay,
place
thank
to
you.
put it.
And it is
Kelly-
interesting for some of the points that they make in that about, why there isn't more companies. You were pointing out, I only know, a handful. And why is that the case? I think that's something chapter 11 kind of addresses as well.
Okay. I shall buy that after this meeting. I'll find it somewhere.
You can get it on Kindle.
This chapter's about 40, 45 pages long.
Wow.
You can get it on Kindle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll probably
I prefer reading in a book, but you can.
Yeah, me too.
I'll avoid Jeff Bezos and go to a company called Abe Books.
Yes, I like Abe's.
Yeah, they're very good. Yeah.
Yeah. The advantage I see in an electronic book is when I want to go back and search it, I
Yeah,
prefer
me
reading
too.
the hard copy.
Yeah.
But when I remember I read something in this book somewhere, I don't know where I read it, which
Yeah.
part of the book to look in. So being able to search is valuable.
My copy of
Yeah.
Deming has got a whole series of yellow stickies in the front where I've identified because the contents page is not good enough, and my contents page gets me to the ones I want.
When we were in DC, I saw a copy of a book Deming had been using at the I think it was the Statistical Society that has the display. And I looked, and on the inside front page of the book, he's got page numbers written down with
Yeah.
little comments.
That's
So
me.
he did the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. If you're going on with another cohort in some future date, do you want to see us terrible old faces turn up again?
Oh yeah, it's repeats. It's valuable for everybody
I'd hope so.
because there's no way in one reading or one discussion group that you can get into everything. You don't even recognize the things you haven't gotten into.
Yeah.
Some light bulb goes on a little later, and you say, "Hey, what about this?"
And I think we've got a mission to try and share the knowledge to help
Yes.
new folks get a grip of the thinking for their industry. That seems to be what's missing mostly. We got MBAs and people going to university and those sort of things, but we need to find a way of sharing the thinking.
Yeah, and the real
Yeah.
experience and the unique,
Yeah.
the unique company experience
Yeah.
is interesting. I remember here in the 90s, because I'd worked at this company, so rocket propulsion, right? In the 90s, after well, the Soviet Union broke apart, the American companies were running over to Russia and looking at their rocket. Remember that, Tim?
Yeah.
Remember that? And that's how the RD-180 came to use by, well, I think it was Martin Marietta at the time, and now they're north of Grumman. So they use the RD-180. It's a Russian, it's a Russian engine that, they. So it's kind of interesting. It's really just interesting. It's not bad they did that.
Mm.
You could look at it like, okay, why are they all of a sudden, they're trying to get them cheaper, right? They're trying to, but it's also interesting because by going after them, they got an inside look at the technology, what they did over there. I think it was kind of known. I believe the Russians were good at combustion. Is that right, Tim? I think that they were good
Yeah.
at that. And maybe materials at the time. They were real workhorses, like their engines, real.
Yeah, a lot of power for the
Yeah.
Apollo in competition and getting to the moon. For the Apollo, the U.S. chose to reduce the size of things and create less weight, and the Russians chose to make more powerful engines so they didn't have to miniaturize stuff.
And I remember a friend of mine she got to go on one of the trips because they toured. Oh, too bad I don't remember enough, or what, I wasn't involved enough, but they toured a couple different factories. I'm like, one might have been in Ukraine, or not Ukraine. Well, no, not Ukraine, but one of their more, not in Moscow. Like they might have gone to a company in Moscow, but one of in the outer regions, right? One of the outer territories. Anyway, of the companies she visited, she said their shop was messy. There'd be piles of metal here and there. Anyway, they had their experts. So it's really just interesting to be closed and say only support your own companies and don't look at the outside. Well, there's plus and minuses for that, right?
Well, yeah, the
close-minded. You don't look at them.
The downside of and they had a term for the technique when I was in the total quality management office. I learned of a technique where you're supposed to decide who in your industry is best at something that you would like to get improved in your organization and go out and study them. The downside of that was if you don't figure out why you're doing what you're doing in your organization and how it fits into your organization, when you get to that other organization, you're not going to be able to see the things you need to see.
Right.
Toyota,
Benchmarking.
yeah, benchmarking, that was it.
Yeah, and it almost to the opposite of what, why United States, they were willing to go over and take a look at what they had, and maybe they want to get their hands on it first. I don't know, but I was mentioning to Tim yesterday after World War II and United States, and they were in Germany looking at what they had, looking at their factories, and taking what they wanted, right? And I think it was the government, maybe the U.S. government had they offered to one of our motor companies, it might have been Ford, but I could have that wrong, VW, the VW manufacturing over there. Oh, you can have this. Here's a little reward for your efforts. And they turned them down. The American Automotive Company turned them down. And then ironically, the VW Bug was so popular here for decades. And here they're being offered them at a time, it's going to be the mid to later 40s. And then you look at the American automobiles in the 50s, right? They were huge, right? And yet it was a VW that became so popular. They could have learned something sooner. Had they accept that company, right? Taking a look what they were doing. Americans loved for decades on end. They were driving those.
One of the difficulties with learning is believing you already know everything, and there was a lot of that going around.
Arrogance, yeah.
Just picking up on the benchmarking as well, the TQM days, because when those visits were organized, you were only benchmarking a tiny subset of the overall system within the organization. You weren't benchmarking the organization. When BMW bought Jaguar, Ralph Speth was the new CEO. He was ex-BMW. He brought over a lot of senior managers from BMW, thinking he could just take them and move them into Jaguar. But it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, Deming used to say, if you're going to copy something without understanding, you're taking a huge risk.
Yeah.
Well, I must leave you, gentlemen. I'm sorry. But thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining. And feel free to join in the next one. Or if we manage to get something together around Dick's suggestion of looking at comparing chapter 11 to what we think Deming was saying, similarities and differences, you could join us with that.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah, excellent.